Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is a little bit exciting for me because I was brainstorming yesterday and for the past couple of days of what I can bring to my channel, because that's what I have most trouble on, is just creating like different content other than my wrap-ups and my hauls, which are my favorite. But I know that some of you had expressed in my earlier videos, because I do love horror and that's my main focus of reading, that it would be great to hear some recommendations on horror books. So I was brainstorming and thinking how I can incorporate more horror reviews into my channel, and I figured I'd bring Fright Fridays. Now, when I initially thought about it, I was leaning more towards vintage horror, but I didn't want to restrict myself when, let's say, a month that I didn't read any old Stephen King or Dan Simmons or any of the vintage, I call it vintage, but you know, like old horror books. So I just decided to call it Fright Friday just because of that. Just that, you know, when I do read, you know, new releases of horror books, I can sort of, you know, talk about that. But mostly this is going to be on vintage horror books, novels, stories. So I'm pretty excited about it. I'm kind of nervous too, because I'm always afraid of reviewing something and giving spoilers or ruining something for somebody. But either way, I'm going to try my best, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. So first, excuse this that's going on. It looks like there should be birds living here. I hate doing my hair. Fun fact, I hate it. It's the worst for me, and I think that's why I do so much color and stuff, to sort of feel like there's something going on up here. But excuse that, it's a bird's nest. So for my first Fright Friday video, and actually my first book review ever on my channel, I am going to be reviewing Dan Simmons' Summer of Night book. Now, I currently read this book. I actually finished it yesterday. And it's my first Dan Simmons book, so that's pretty exciting. I have a couple notes here on this notebook, because you know I'm old school. I like to write things. Paper and pen, pencil and pen, pencil and paper is my favorite way to go. So let's go. Let's get started. All right. So like I said earlier, this is a Dan Simmons book. And like I said, this is the first Dan Simmons book that I do read. And the reason why I read this, I didn't even know this book existed, but the reason why I read this was because Nocturnal Reader's Box, whatever. They had a readathon or read along with this, and I thought, great, I'm joining. So I did check this book out from the library, but I do have my very own copy coming in the mail. I ordered it through Thrift Books because it's just so cool and so pretty, and I really enjoyed the story. But I'm jumping ahead, so let me give you a little info on this book. Well, this book was written in 1991, but it takes place in 1960s in a town called Elm Haven, Illinois. It's actually a small town, and so this book follows 5 boys and on their summer break, on their school summer break, and it actually starts off on the last day of school, and then it just progresses throughout their summer break, and it follows some supernatural occurrences that start happening. Now, I'm going to start with the cons of the book. Cons for me, I know that this book is very, very loved. A lot of people have rated this book 5 stars. So I'm treading lightly. So cons for me. This book is 555 pages long, at least in this edition, the hardcover edition. And I just feel like it's about 200 pages too long. It's very descriptive, but also very repetitive in its descriptions. Which can be a good thing and a bad thing. A good thing because you really get a sense of the world. It's very descriptive as far as the characters and the world building. But it's a bit too long, in my opinion. Also, this book contains a lot of racial slur. Now, I want to touch a little bit on racial slurs. Of course, I don't agree with racial slurs. Unless it is a book that, like a lot of Stephen King books, and I'm referring to this one. I don't know if a lot of Dan Simmons books are like this, but books that take place in the 60s, 50s, 60s, in a time like that, racial slurs were very common. So I can't see a book being written about that time or that era without it having racial slurs. It wouldn't be true to the story. How can we state, when somebody's reading a historical fiction, how can we argue about it not being true to facts but not feel the same way about racial slurs back in the 60s? I don't agree with it, but unfortunately it was a very common thing. So I'm sort of used to and expect that in a book that's concentrated in that time. Especially in this one, this is held in a very small town in the 60s where there's a lot of farming, and it's just a very small town. So I don't have a problem with it. I don't have a problem reading about it now. If it was a book that was written in today's time, in today's, you know, day and age, that the story took place in today's day and age, then that's different, because it's not a common thing unless it's in small niches and groups around the world. But am I making sense? You know, so that does not bother me. It's not that's not exactly how the author feels about people. That's not why he's writing it. But it's incorporated in the story because of the time where it takes place. So I don't have a problem with that, but I know some people don't like that, which is fine, you know. If you don't like racial slurs, this does have a lot of racial slurs towards colored people, towards Hispanic, you know, not a lot. It's not like in every sentence or in every chapter, it really isn't, but it is spread across the book. So I just wanted to let you know that. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was the horror aspect of the book. Now, I'm not the best person to speak on the horror element of it, even though that's one of my favorite things to read. I don't get scared by books. Now, movies, oh my gosh, I will be scared shitless. But with books, that doesn't tend to happen to me, and I do form the whole world in my head. I am seeing it, but not directly, so I guess that's why it doesn't scare me. So with that being said, the book was not scary to me at all. I think that some elements of it were sort of like, you know, I love reading weird books and books that don't make sense in a way, with like weird elements. But some things in this book were a little bit like, really? Well, that's not really scary, and I really don't see that happening, you know, to where a lot of elements in the book of the supernatural I do believe in and I do see happening. There was just a couple of parts that were just a little bit much for me. Now, going into the prose of the book and the elements that I loved so much of the book. This book, because it is descriptive, it gives a lot of, it's very atmospheric. It's very eerie and creepy as far as the descriptions of, you know, the night or even the day or storms or, you know, blah blah blah. So I loved that element of it. It takes place, like I said, in the summer. Summer is one of my favorite seasons. I grew up in Miami, Florida, so it's basically summer all year round there, for except maybe like a couple weeks of, you know, being in the 50s or 60s. So I grew up around the beach. I was raised around the beach, and so I love summer. I love summer nights. That's one of my favorite things here in Texas is summer nights. You know, the color of the sky, when it's turning into nighttime, you know, that evening sky, the heat. So I love, that's one of my favorite things. And this had a lot of summer nights. This takes a lot of, you know, there's 5 boys and their afternoons and playing outside and running around, and then the storms. So it's very atmospheric, and I love that about the book. I love the character development. I feel that because it was descriptive, and it's a good and bad thing, and I'm repeating myself within the video, you got to sense a lot about the characters, their families, their friendships. Some of the characters I didn't grow a connection with. That's just how it is in every book. You know, you're going to have your characters that you're loving, you're going to have your characters where you're like, eh. But I fell in love one of the characters, which is my favorite, and it's Dwayne McBride. He was my favorite character in the whole entire book. And I find that the parts, you know, him and his father live on the farm and they do corn crops and all of that stuff. And I found that those scenes with Dwayne at night, they were a little bit intense, and they did freak me out a little bit. It wasn't like scary, like, oh my gosh, like I went outside and I was like, no. But it was creepy, it was eerie, and those were some of the parts that had my heart racing, and I just loved the times that I got to spend with Dwayne McBride. He was my favorite character in the whole book. With all of that being said, the rating that I gave this book was 3 out of 5 stars. I gave it 3 stars because because of the eeriness, because of, it's a small time eeriness, because of the summer nights, and all of that I said. But I did only give it 3 stars because of the cons that I did find in it. When a book is just too long and I'm skipping over parts, it's gonna drop the rating down for me a little bit, even though at the end I found this to be a great read. Another thing that I do want to point out, this is a very slow burn, obviously. There are some climatic moments in it, very rare. It takes about 150 pages to really get to anything that was happening in the book. You do get a little bit in the first couple of chapters of something that does happen, but they don't even dive into that. It's almost like unsaid for like a long time, and it really didn't get to anything till like about 150 pages. So anyways, I do recommend this book if you like slow burns. If you don't, I think you would get a little bit bored with this. But if you're into horror and you're into Stephen King and all those like old vintage type of horrors, I do recommend this. I really did enjoy it. I mean, look at this cover. Like I said, I did check this out of the library, but let's just hide this. But it's just very eerie. This is the school that takes place. It's old central school, and then there's a little truck in front of it. It's like a little red truck. I don't know if you can see it, but either way, I enjoyed this book, despite all the cons with it. There is a blurb by Stephen King back here. So yeah, that's everything that I have to say about Summer of Night. If you guys have any requests on any horror books that you would like me to review, let me know. List them down below in the comment section, and if I haven't read them, I'll try to pick them up, and if I read them, I would gladly do a review for you. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.